Nobody wants to say it out loud, but motorcycles in 2026 are playing by a different set of rules. The machines still look right, they still sound right, and the marketing still promises the same freedom riders have chased for decades. But behind that, ownership is getting heavier, more expensive, and a lot less predictable than it used to be. That is the part most people only understand after they commit, because the real change is not on the bike, it is everything built around it. Watch this all the way through, because once you see how that shift really works, it becomes a lot harder to walk into your next purchase blind. What's happening? Something changed, and you don't need a report to feel it. Buying a motorcycle in 2026 does not hit the same way it used to. You walk into a dealership or scroll listings, and instead of excitement, there is hesitation sitting in the background. Not fear, not doubt, just something slightly off that was never there before. It is not about how the bike rides. It is not about power or comfort or even design. It is about what happens after you bring it home. Ownership feels heavier now, not physically, but mentally. You start thinking ahead in ways you did not used to. Questions come up before the key ever turns. You used to look at a bike and think about the road. Now you look at it and think about what could go wrong later. That shift is quiet, but it changes everything. It changes how long you stand there. It changes how fast you make a decision. It even changes how much you trust what you are looking at. Nobody tells you this directly. There is no sign on the wall saying ownership is different now. But if you have been around long enough, you can feel it. That simple connection between rider and machine is not as clean as it once was. Something got in the middle of it. Take a step deeper, and the first crack starts to show where most riders spend their time. The garage isn't what it used to be. You used to be able to roll a bike into the garage and handle most of what it needed yourself. Oil, cables, adjustments, even deeper work if you had the patience. That connection between your hands and the machine was part of the ownership. It was not just maintenance, it was understanding. Now that line is not as clear. Jobs that used to be straightforward are getting pushed out of reach, not because you forgot how to do them, but because access is tighter than it used to be. Certain systems are not as open, certain fixes are not as simple, and sometimes the solution is not sitting in your toolbox anymore. You notice it the first time something small turns into a bigger job than it should be. A check that used to take an afternoon starts pointing toward tools or steps that were never part of the process before. You start hearing the same phrase more often, the one that points you somewhere else, instead of keeping the work in your own space. That shift creates distance. Not dramatic distance, but enough to feel. You spend less time learning the bike and more time working around it. Less time solving problems directly, more time figuring out who or what needs to be involved to get it done. And once that control starts to move, it does not stay contained in the garage. If this is hitting close to home, like the video and subscribe for straight, no spin breakdowns like this, and share your take below. What have you noticed changing with ownership lately? Real rider insight matters more now than ever. The real cost doesn't show up on the sticker. The number you see when you buy the bike is only the beginning. That has always been true, but the gap between that number and what you actually spend over time is getting wider. You do not feel it right away. It shows up slowly, piece by piece, after the ride becomes routine. Service intervals come around, and the totals look a little higher than expected. Parts take longer to show up, which stretches time and sometimes pushes you into decisions you would not have made before. Small delays turn into bigger disruptions, and those disruptions often carry a cost. It is not one big hit. It is a series of smaller ones that stack up. A job that used to be quick becomes something that requires more steps. A part that used to be easy to find becomes something you wait on. Over time, those moments start to shape how you look at the bike. You begin to think ahead differently. Not just about rides, but about what the next few months might bring. Maintenance stops being routine and starts feeling like something you have to plan around more carefully. That changes the experience, even if the bike itself still performs the way you expect. And even after you accept those costs, there is another layer that is harder to pin down. Why identical bikes don't feel identical anymore. You can line up two of the same model, same year, same specs, and still hear two different stories from the people who own them. One rider has a smooth experience. Another runs into issues that never should have been there in the first place. That kind of gap used to be rare. Now it shows up more often than it should. It is not always something obvious. Sometimes it is small differences that add up over time. The way something wears, the way something holds up, the way the bike responds after a few thousand miles. Nothing dramatic on its own, but enough to make one ownership experience feel different from another. There are a lot of moving pieces behind that. Parts coming from different places, timelines that are tighter than they used to be, pressure to keep production moving even when conditions are not ideal. You do not see those factors directly, but you feel the result of them when you live with the bike. It does not mean every bike is a problem. It means the certainty is not what it used to be. And for riders who have spent years trusting what they were buying, that shift matters more than anything printed on a spec sheet. The market quietly shrunk under everyone. The numbers tell the story without emotion. Motorcycle sales in the United States peaked around 2006, when total annual volume reached roughly 1,100,000 units. That was the high point, the moment when demand, credit, and confidence all lined up at the same time. From there, the direction changed. By 2025, total annual sales had fallen to just over 57,000 units. That is not a small dip. That is a contraction that cuts the market down to nearly half of what it once was. The scale of that change does not hit all at once, but it becomes clear when you step back and look at the timeline. Year after year, the numbers edged lower. Some years dropped sharply, others flattened out, but the overall direction never truly reversed. Temporary rebounds showed up, but they never carried enough momentum to rebuild what was lost. The peak stayed in the past, and the gap between then and now kept widening. It is not tied to a single event. It is not one bad year or one bad decision. It is a gradual shift that settled in and stayed. The market simply does not move the same volume it used to, and that reality has been in place for longer than most people realize. You can trace it through reports, sales summaries, and industry tracking data. The pattern holds steady no matter where you look. Fewer bikes are being sold overall, and that baseline has reset to a lower level than what defined the earlier years. Pressure like that does not stay in the background for long. Dealerships are feeling the pressure first. The impact shows up where bikes are actually sold. Dealership floors that once stayed busy now move at a slower pace, and that shift has forced real changes at the ground level. Some locations that stood for decades have closed their doors, not because the business vanished overnight, but because the math stopped working. Margins on new motorcycles have tightened. Dealers rely on volume to make those numbers work, and when volume drops, the gap becomes harder to close. Inventory sits longer. Turnover slows. The balance between what comes in and what goes out starts to lean the wrong way. That pressure builds quietly. It does not look dramatic at first. A few fewer sales in a month, a little more time between deals. But over time, those small changes stack up. Expenses remain steady while income becomes less predictable. That combination forces decisions that were not necessary before. Some dealers adapt by shifting focus. Others reduce operations. Some step away entirely after years in business. These are not isolated cases. They appear across different regions, affecting both large and small operations. The pattern is consistent enough to recognize without needing to search for it. Inside those spaces, the tone changes as well. Conversations shift from growth to stability. The goal becomes holding ground instead of expanding it. That mindset reflects the environment they are operating in, one where every sale carries more weight than it used to. A closer look reveals that the story is not just about less activity. The industry didn't collapse. It split. What looks like decline on the surface turns out to be something more complex underneath. The overall numbers went down, but inside the market, movement did not stop. It shifted direction. Certain segments began to shrink, while others started to grow at the same time. Large touring motorcycles and traditional cruisers have seen consistent drops in recent years. Those categories once carried a major share of total sales, and their slowdown plays a big role in the overall contraction. At the same time, smaller displacement bikes and entry-level models have moved in the opposite direction. Sport bikes under 750 cubic centimeters have gained traction. Lightweight adventure models have followed a similar path. These categories appeal to a different kind of buyer, and their growth shows up clearly when measured against the decline of the older segments. This creates a split inside the industry. On one side, the machines that defined earlier decades lose ground. On the other, a different class of motorcycles picks up momentum. The total volume does not recover, but the composition changes. Manufacturers respond to that shift by adjusting their lineups. More attention moves toward the segments that are growing. Less emphasis is placed on those that are shrinking. That reallocation reinforces the divide, making it more visible over time. Once that split takes hold, the focus turns toward who is driving the growth on the other side. The new buyer isn't following the old playbook. The riders coming into the market now approach motorcycles differently. Their decisions are shaped by priorities that do not match what defined earlier generations. The emotional pull is still there, but it is balanced against practical thinking in a way that changes how purchases are made. Price plays a larger role in the initial decision. Entry points matter more. A motorcycle is evaluated not just for how it feels on the road, but for how it fits into a broader set of daily considerations. That includes time, flexibility, and how easily it integrates into an existing routine. Expectations around ownership follow that same pattern. Simplicity and usability carry weight. The idea of a machine being approachable matters as much as how it performs. Features that reduce barriers or streamline the experience become part of the appeal. The buying process reflects this shift. Research happens earlier and runs deeper. Comparisons are made across multiple options before a decision is reached. Impulse plays a smaller role. The process slows down, not because interest is gone, but because the approach has changed. Over time, that alignment shapes the direction of growth. The buyers driving that growth are not chasing the same things, and the industry follows where that demand leads. Manufacturers are reacting, not leading. The direction coming out of manufacturers right now is not driven by long-term confidence. It is driven by adjustment. You can see it in how quickly lineups change, how often pricing shifts, and how messaging starts to move toward accessibility instead of legacy identity. The focus is no longer about defining the future. It is about staying aligned with what is still moving. That shows up in product decisions first. More attention goes towards smaller displacement platforms, simplified designs, and models positioned to bring in riders who would not have considered buying before. These are not random additions. They are calculated responses to what is still selling and what is not. Marketing follows the same pattern. Language changes. The emphasis moves away from tradition and toward entry points. The story becomes less about heritage and more about approachability. It is not subtle once you notice it. The shift is visible across multiple brands at the same time. Speed is another signal. Development cycles tighten, and updates appear more frequently. That pace suggests urgency. When companies feel stable, they take their time. When they feel pressure, they move faster, adjusting as they go, instead of setting a fixed direction and staying with it. Look closely at how those moves land, and another change becomes impossible to ignore. Legacy brands don't feel untouchable anymore. There was a time when certain names carried automatic confidence. You saw the badge, and you knew what to expect. That sense of certainty came from years of consistency, from machines that built reputations mile after mile. That kind of trust does not disappear overnight, but it does change when the ground underneath it shifts. Today, that certainty feels thinner. Not gone, but different. Riders still respect those brands, but the conversation around them has shifted. Instead of assuming quality, people start asking questions. Instead of relying on reputation alone, they look for confirmation before making a decision. You can hear it in how riders talk. Comparisons come up more often. Alternatives get mentioned in the same breath. That would have been rare in earlier years, when loyalty ran deeper and hesitation showed up less frequently. Now, that hesitation is part of the process. Perception follows experience, and when ownership stories vary more than they used to, perception adjusts with them. A brand that once felt untouchable starts to feel like one option among several. That is not a collapse. It is a shift in how trust is built and maintained. Visibility plays a role as well. Information travels faster, and every ownership experience, good or bad, has a way of reaching more people. That exposure adds pressure. It reduces the space where reputation alone can carry a decision without being questioned. Step back from the names themselves, and a different force becomes easier to see. If you want more real, no-spin breakdowns on where motorcycles are heading, subscribe now. This channel stays focused on truth, not hype, so you can make smarter decisions before your next bike, not after you've already paid the price. Value has rewritten the rules. What riders expect for their money is not the same as it was before. The definition of value has expanded. It is no longer tied only to brand, size, or category. It includes features, reliability, ease of ownership, and how much a bike delivers for what it costs over time. Lower-priced machines have played a role in that shift. They have shown that a motorcycle does not need to sit at the top end of the price range to feel complete. When riders see strong performance, solid build quality, and modern features at a lower entry point, it resets what they consider acceptable. That reset changes how higher-priced bikes are judged. It does not make them irrelevant, but it raises the bar. Riders begin to ask what they are getting beyond the basics. They look for justification in the difference. Not just in the name or the category, comparison becomes sharper. Instead of looking within a single segment, riders start looking across multiple options. The question shifts from what fits a certain image to what delivers the most overall. That mindset brings clarity, and it also introduces pressure. Manufacturers feel that pressure in how their products are evaluated. Pricing strategies adjust. Feature sets expand. The balance between cost and expectation becomes more precise because riders are paying closer attention to what they receive in return. With that shift in place, the way decisions are made begins to change as well. Riders aren't buying the same way anymore. The pace of buying has slowed, not because interest disappeared, but because the process became more deliberate. Riders take more time before making a decision. They look deeper, compare more options, and weigh factors that might not have mattered as much in the past. Research is no longer a quick step. It is part of the experience. Information is easier to access and riders use it. Reviews, ownership feedback, and long-term impressions all become part of the evaluation. That level of detail changes how confident someone feels before committing. Impulse plays a smaller role. The idea of walking in, seeing a bike, and riding out the same day still exists, but it is less common. More decisions happen over time, with pauses built into the process. That hesitation is not weakness. It is awareness. Expectations around ownership feed into that awareness. Riders think beyond the first ride. They consider what the next year might look like, what maintenance might involve, and how the bike will fit into their routine. Those questions shape the decision as much as the initial impression. The result is a market where decisions carry more thought than before. Riders still buy, still ride, still connect with machines. The difference is in how they get there, and that difference changes everything that follows. Motorcycle culture is splitting in real time. The culture around motorcycles is not holding together the way it used to. It is stretching in two directions at the same time, and that split is becoming harder to ignore. On one side, you have riders who built their connection through years on the road, long trips, and machines that demanded involvement. On the other, a different approach is taking shape, one that sees riding through a more flexible lens. The difference is not about right or wrong. It is about what riding represents. For some, it is still tied to identity, routine, and a sense of continuity. For others, it is something that fits around a schedule, something that can be picked up and put down without carrying the same weight. Both exist, but they do not always overlap the way they once did. You can see it in how bikes are used. Some riders measure time in miles and seasons, while others measure it in shorter windows, smaller loops, and occasional rides. The meaning attached to the machine shifts with that change. It becomes less about long-term connection and more about immediate experience. That shift shows up in conversations as well. What used to be shared ground becomes more segmented. The stories sound different. The priorities sound different. Even the way people describe a good ride can vary depending on which side of that line they are standing on. Look beyond that split, and the decision to ride starts to carry a different kind of weight. Riding isn't just expensive, it's a bigger commitment. The decision to own a motorcycle is no longer as simple as wanting one and making it happen. It asks more from you now, not just financially, but in terms of time, attention, and how it fits into everything else going on in your life. That added layer changes how the decision feels before it is even made. Time plays a bigger role than it used to. Riding is not always something you can step into without planning. It competes with other responsibilities, and those responsibilities tend to grow heavier as the years go by. Finding space for it requires more intention, and that intention shapes how often the bike actually gets used. Effort follows the same pattern, keeping a motorcycle ready, staying on top of what it needs, and making sure it fits into your routine all take energy. None of that is new, but the balance has shifted. The margin that used to make it easy to stay consistent is not as wide as it once was. Lifestyle factors add another layer. Where you live, how you move through your day, and what you prioritize all influence whether a motorcycle feels like a natural fit or something that needs to be worked around. That consideration becomes part of the decision instead of something that comes later. Shift your perspective outward, and a different reality comes into view. The rest of the world didn't slow down. Outside of the United States, motorcycles carry a different role entirely. In many parts of the world, they are not optional. They are essential. They move people to work, carry families through daily routines, and handle tasks that would otherwise require something far more expensive or less practical. In those places, demand follows necessity. Millions of motorcycles are sold each year, not because of trends or lifestyle choices, but because they solve real transportation problems. The scale is difficult to compare directly, but the difference in purpose is clear the moment you look at how they are used. That contrast drives the global market, where growth continues because demand is necessary, not optional. New riders enter out of need, sustaining production. The machines reflect that reality, built for durability and everyday use, prioritizing function first, creating a straightforward, purpose-driven relationship between rider and machine. Bring the focus back home, and the takeaway becomes easier to see. What this means before you buy your next bike. The landscape around motorcycles has shifted, and that shift affects how you approach your next decision. The machines are still there. The roads are still there. What changed is everything around them, from how they are built to how they fit into your life. Ownership is not what it used to be. It carries more variables, more considerations, and more outcomes that are not always obvious at the start. That does not make it worse. It makes it different. Recognizing that difference is what allows you to navigate it without surprises. The market has shifted, changing what's available and how bikes are positioned. That shift shapes your options and demands a clearer understanding before you choose. Your decision now sits at the center of those changes, not just what you want to ride, but how it fits a system that no longer works the same. Clarity replaces uncertainty, and a sharper eye keeps the experience honest and worth it. Motorcycles are not gone. The road is not gone, but the reality around them has changed, and the riders who understand that early are the ones who avoid the hard lessons later. If this opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe, and share your experience below. What have you noticed changing with ownership lately? Because real rider insight matters now more than ever.